All right.
Hey.
It's Friday.
Yay!
We're going to sip some whiskey. And we're starting, as we were setting this stuff up, we kind of accidentally set this shot up. So we thought, we need an unofficial sponsor.
Yeah.
Now, we're big fans of local spirit stores.
Yep.
And that's yours.
That is mine. That's where I get most of my bottles. They're an unofficial sponsor because they're actually not paying us to do this.
You actually pay them.
I pay them a lot of money.
A lot of money. And you are?
I'm Dan Cavallari, Practical Still.
And I'm Mark Still, the Practical Still. We're going to drink some whiskey.
Let's do it.
Last time we did this, it was just me for a brief one just to talk about the end of the year, because you were ill and I was snow and there was fires and it was hell and brimstone. Mm-hmm. And I want to talk about my favorite whiskeys of the year.
That's a fine idea.
And my favorite is whiskey, not just of the year, it turns out of all time so far, is the Russell's Reserve 13.
You and Fred Minnick.
Yeah. Fred Minnick, that's right. And I came out of it first.
You did.
Out of the block strong.
Yeah.
Delicious whiskey, followed up by the Dickel 15-year-old single barrels that are they're all over the place. They're delicious, crazy proof ranges. Mm-hmm. I haven't had one yet I don't really love. Same. And they're $60.
Yep. Yeah, and I'll talk about my favorite bottles of the year in a little while, but I've had a few of these bottles now, the Dickel 15. Every single one is consistently good with slightly different characteristics in each one. That's what's so neat about it, I think.
And I actually heard when I think somebody had watched that stream after the fact, and they said, and I wish I remembered the username so I could give them credit, but they said that what they do with those different proofs is they aren't really all those extremely different proofs. They've got a handful of labels in the general proof ranges. So if it's an 86 point whatever proof, they'll bring an 88 one down to that. But because of the way the TTB rules work is you have to have a label approved. Kind of hard to approve them ahead of time.
Right.
So I thought that was interesting. I didn't know how they were doing that. Yeah. How are they you could handwrite them on single barrels and stuff, but how are they pre-printing all those? It's crazy.
Yeah, it's a tricky balance.
Yeah.
Speaking of, the reason I have these little glasses, Mark.
Which little glasses?
These little glasses.
Those little glasses?
Right here, these ones. The reason I have these is I bought these on purpose because if you've ever watched our live streams or any of our videos, you know that I do what's called a Dan pour.
A Dan pour.
Dan pours are heavy pours. We have a lot of bottles here.
Yes, I have to go home. I do not live here in the world headquarters.
Right. So we kept drinking out of these big goblet glasses. I said, all right, well, I got to get smaller glasses. So we did little samples.
Funny thing, last night I did the coldest sitting on the deck with my friends we do on Thursdays ever. It's 8 degrees. And we were scared, or one of them was scared the glass would have problems. So he brought out metal Ardbeg mugs.
Oh, jeez.
It turns out if you hand me a big mug this big, that what looks like a little bit of Ardbeg there's a lot of Ardbeg in the bottom of that coffee mug.
There's nothing wrong with a lot of Ardbeg.
But I think what we're going to do today is you're going to talk about some of your favorites of the year.
Yep.
But one of the things that we put on Instagram recently was, again, recapping the year, with Deerhammer, because Deerhammer, we had a podcast where we were talking about young whiskeys and what we thought we knew about young whiskeys or tasted in young whiskeys. And luckily, Lenny Eckstein, owner and founder of Deerhammer, heard that and invited us up to educate us because clearly we did not know what we were talking about.
Metaphorically slapped us around a little bit.
He did.
Yeah.
But I think his point was, you're not wrong, you're just not getting the full picture. And the full picture, it turns out, is that some of these craft distillers are doing incredible things. And Lenny is so open that he walked us through things like barrel entry proof, the way they toast their barrels, the way you do a cut, which I had no idea how that worked. I mean, I knew they were doing cuts, but I didn't realize that the width of that heart cut could have such a dramatic difference on the whiskey.
Yeah.
The Deerhammer American Single Malt just blew me away. It's just crazy. So luckily, I thought we were all done with our standard offerings, and I just noticed in your cabinet that you still had that one, and so we're going to sip on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, in terms of...
I said, we're going to sip on that.
I'm reaching for it. Wow. In terms of favorite whiskeys of the year, I mean, just the story that came out of this, I think, really warrants this being in the top, the top list here. I got to line this up.
Right there.
All right, good.
Right there.
Glamour shot. There you go.
You've got to figure out sound for that. I don't think that's enough sound.
I just don't want to get your camera wet.
There's cameras and switches and all sorts of stuff.
All right. So just in terms of the story and the education we got from going to Deerhammer, I mean, what a fantastic bottle to buy, and what a fantastic distillery to support. I mean, Lenny was just so open and willing to discuss everything. He handed us a long straw and said, "Sip out of the barrel."
I didn't think about that.
I mean, come on.
And look, I've always wanted to thieve a barrel, where you get the copper and you thieve it. And I still like to do that one day. But when a dude hands you a 4-foot-long silicone straw that's this big around and says, those bungs come out real easy because they're also silicone, knock yourself out. Oh, my goodness. It just couldn't get any better.
Yeah, I mean, just, one of the things that I whined about in our first podcast about young whiskeys was that how it all kind of tasted the same. It was like oak and burning and like that grappa taste, the
char,
fruity. And this has none of that. I mean, there's maybe you can definitely tell it's a young whiskey.
I don't know anymore.
Yeah,
I think we need to redefine that or something, because I think that particular batch had an average of around 3 years in it, so it's maybe a little bit more than 3, maybe a little less, but mostly an average of 3. It's just delicious, and still, I've never gotten so much chocolate out of a whiskey. God, it's just delicious.
Yeah, and it was pretty telling when he actually brought out actual chocolate.
They keep chocolate. They keep chocolate around because it's one of the things they're looking for to put into their whiskeys, and so they hang on to Mexican chocolates and different chocolates as reference points, and it was outstanding.
Right.
If you didn't see all that, if you go to the channel, the YouTube channel, and subscribe. But while you're there subscribing, there's a watch list for all the videos we did at Deerhammer those 2 days. It was an afternoon and a morning. And there's a whole section of that where we're drinking the whiskey and he brings the chocolate out. And it was fascinating.
If you're a chocolate connoisseur, I mean, the best way to describe this is like a super dark chocolate. Yeah. Like an 80 or 90, 85%.
High cocoa.
Yeah, high cocoa. I mean, you really get, it's just so chocolatey. And it lasts a long time, the finish. And we talk a lot about like what a whiskey has to do to be considered good. And it's like, the nose, right up front, the taste, across the tongue, and then the finish. This nails all of it.
Yeah, and if there's, I think that was 92 proof, I believe. Yep, 92 proof. If there's one thing I wish there was more of here is that mid-palate mouthfeel, the way it just kind of spreads across. But as we know from drinking out of the barrels, it's all there. So if the only thing I wish for, Lenny, is maybe 6 more proof points.
All I wish for is a straw that reaches from my home to his barrels.
To BV, where they, delicious.
Yeah, excellent. So definitely a top bottle of the year, and a surprising one.
Yeah,
so.
and two lessons. One, if we want something unique and we want some experimentation, we're going to have to look at the craft distillers.
Yep.
Craft used to kind of mean crap. It does not mean, I guess it could still mean it. Hell, there's some big distillers that aren't any good.
Yeah.
But lesson one, give some small ones a chance. And frankly, they're all over the country. So look around wherever you live. If you don't live close to Buena Vista, give those a chance. And two, the whiskey's just good. I don't know that we need to bother with all the caveats now. It's either good whiskey or it isn't. And Deerhammer opened our eyes. We had another local Boulder Spirits that was super good.
Yep.
We're going to try some Wilderness Trail, maybe gotten a little bigger, but they've got a great reputation going too.
Should we transition right into this?
Sure.
I'm not going to call this one a bottle of the year because I just honestly haven't sipped off of it enough. I've only had one sip of this so far. But it's an interesting story. I think Wilderness Trail is one of those ones I've seen recently, very recently, and was curious to try it. Somebody gave this to me as a gift, so kind of fell into my hand. This is 100 proof, bottled and bond. It's small batch Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. So for those of you who don't know, Wilderness Trail, please do go ahead and do that while I'm babbling. They're out of Kentucky, and they've been around since 2013, so fairly young. But before that, they were heavily involved in the bourbon industry, consulting with other bigger brands that you have heard of. So they're not new to this exactly. And according to their website, these are aged between 5 and 7 years. So this is not necessarily a young product either. I mean, you think about Booker's, 6 years-ish. So
I'm going to put that there because that's some good information.
Yeah. Non-chill filtered, which is Mark's go word.
Love the non-chill filter. The bottled and bond thing, I remember not too many years ago, because I've been a bottled and bond freak for quite a while. There were, I think the number I saw, and this was probably only 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 17 bottled and bond whiskeys on the market. 17. Now, it's got to be hundreds. And that's awesome, because, reminder, to achieve the bottled and bond designation, it's got to be at least 4 years old, exactly 100 proof, the product of one distiller in one distilling season, so they're not mingling lots of barrels. And it has to be aged in a federally bonded warehouse, which turns out these days is no big deal. They all generally function that way. So if they decide a whiskey can be bottled and bond, that box is already checked and off it comes.
Right.
But it does give you this baseline of it's at least 4 years old. It's got real proof. It shouldn't have other nonsense in it because it's bourbon, but it's one more level of protection. And the Bottled and Bond Act of 1897, I believe, was the first consumer protection act in the U.S.
And just to give you a sense of how wrong we've been about young whiskeys, if I was going to blind taste this, I would just from the nose, I would say, oh, this one's younger because it's got more of that sweetness, that grappa, that grain smell to it. But it's not. It's actually older than the Deerhammer. These two flavor profiles could not be more different. I'll wait for you to say. Yeah, it is. But it's way more cinnamon, right? Like cinnamon and spice. Whereas
it's baking spice. It's I don't know what else is in there.
Yeah,
it's sharp.
Coming from this, I think that's part of it too. Yeah. The second sip is different, although the finish does have that sharpness.
Let me try a second sip.
By all means. It does have a little bit of a tang on the back end, which I'm not in love with, but the flavors across the tongue are quite good. And actually the mouth feels pretty good too.
Yeah, there is a bit of a char to it. That's good. A little proofy for 100.
Yeah.
I'm really trying hard to go, that's awesome.
It's not.
I don't know that that's awesome.
I wouldn't call it awesome, but I'm not unhappy to have it on my shelf. It's.
Here's the problem.
Tell me the problem.
If one that neither one of us cared for, which was a little surprising because how much we like the Jim Beam Distiller's Cut. One of those in that same kind of family that's bottled and bond. It's a Beam product that's probably barely 4 years old. Was Old Tub, and it's got a lot of that same. It's just a little rough. It's got a little bit of that barrel char feel to it. Doesn't have the best mouth feel. It's a little hot for 100 proof, but it's $17 or $18.
I would say, the one thing I would say about this is that coming from this, which has a very surprisingly smooth mouthfeel to it and taste profile, like flavor profile, is pretty consistent across the tongue. This one is doing a little bit more. It's like changing as it goes across the tongue. And
there's something else I didn't realize till you I'm glad you turned it around there. That sweet mash is kind of interesting. Most American whiskeys these days use a sour mash where they take some of the spent mash from one batch, they use it as a starter in the next batch, and back before we had really good sanitation, it was both a way to introduce some consistency and some better sanitation because it jump-started the fermentation of the next batch. Recently, some distillers have gone to a sweet mash, which means they basically just start over again with the new mash. Most notably, and probably one of the first to really start pushing that, is Peerless. So Peerless, for their bourbons and ryes, use a sweet mash. So, kudos to that. That may be what I'm picking up is something's a little different there.
Yeah.
But definitely different.
It's definitely a sharper taste. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. I think, I wonder what would happen if we'd sipped this first.
I'll tell you what else it is. Some whiskeys absolutely align, the nose and the palate align. This does not. It is super sweet and syrupy on the nose. It is not that way on the palate.
No, to me, cinnamon is the overarching taste profile here. I would say not bad.
Not bad, but with each sip, I'm liking a little more. So you could be right. It could be just the undue influence of something else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we're going to keep putting something else's on top. You don't have to do that. You can just have a bottle of Wilderness Trail.
We do
enjoy
this for
it for
you.
what it is. Yeah. Hopefully, we at least call it out as a bottled and bond, non-chill filtered, sweet mash, all some cool stuff, worth investing a few bucks extra over something like an Old Tub. Cool. What's next?
Well, so you want to talk about some of my favorites for the year?
I do. I want to know what you were thinking.
Well, so one of my absolute favorites is not here because I drank it. Which is the Russell's single barrels, which are phenomenal. And that really is in line with one of your favorites of the year, or your top favorite of the year, which is the Russell's 13. I have not been able to get my hands on that. I'm sure a lot of you haven't because it was
I shared
so
a sip,
difficult.
and I guess I could have brought it today, but I didn't.
I'm not going to cry. I have had a sip from this guy, and it's phenomenal. Yeah. But I want to also say, I haven't tasted that side by side with some of the single barrels.
I have, and it's interesting. I just did that.
Yeah.
Because I thought, and I'm drinking, I had a little sip of the 13. Actually, it may have been the other night when I was doing the live on it.
While you're talking.
While I'm talking, go ahead and I'm going to go back to the pouring camera.
Pour cam.
I think it was that night that when I went downstairs, I still was a little sippy. I wanted a little more sip, and I poured the last little bit of a club pick Russell single barrel.
I did a Dan pour for me and not for you. So.
Well, that's okay. I have to. Yeah.
Oh yeah, you have to drive. I have to stumble to the back door.
And so I poured that single barrel Russells, and I thought this will be the same. You know, it's so good, it'll be lovely. There was a difference, and it a little bit of difference on the palate, the mouthfeel, a little bit of difference in the finish. But boy, I don't know how you beat those Russell single barrels. First of all, because there's a standard offering where you can walk into almost any store in the country. There's a $55 or $60 standard offering Russell single barrel sitting on the shelf. Yeah. You just can't beat that. Yeah. Second, because there's a lot of club picks. Yeah. Those club picks can be a year or two older. They can sit in different warehouses, and they're just staggeringly good.
Well, what I will say is those single barrels, and I haven't tasted it side by side, but those single barrels are phenomenal. And we did a side by side of George T. Stagg versus Stagg Jr. Both phenomenal, but yes, there are very clear differences. Yeah. And I think that's the case here too. It's been a long time since I've had the 13, so I can't speak to it, but I can tell you every single bottle of Russells that I've had this year has been fantastic.
You can expand that to everything Wild Turkey.
Wild Turkey has been.
Although I will say, we never drink the 81 proof bourbon or the 81 proof rye. I have had the 81 proof rye. It's not bad. But anything past that, the Wild Turkey 101, all the way up to the Master's Keep stuff, phenomenally delicious. There's an argument to be made that it's so good, under $100, it's not worth spending the money on the Master's Keep. Having had the Master's Keep, I disagree. I wouldn't buy multiples, but I will buy every one at least once when I get a chance. They're just delicious.
Now that we've sung the praises of Russells, we're drinking Old Forester.
It's good too.
It is very good. And so this is an Old Forester single barrel strength, which is an excellent bottle, but I'm not actually picking this one as one of my top of the year, but there's a reason we're talking about this, and it's because of this bottle. This has been great, and we spent, I think it was like $60, $50 on this.
No, it was 80.
80, okay.
Pricey.
Yeah, it's pricey. It's good, and it hits you real fast with some fire.
134.3 proof.
Oh, it's big.
It ain't playing around.
No, and so the Old Forester 1920 is 115 proof, so not quite as blast you in the face hot.
But $30 less a bottle.
But $30 less.
25.
Yeah, I got paid 60 for this.
So $20 less.
But this is something you can find anywhere, and it is so good, so good. And that's what most of my bottles of the year are. Yeah. Is stuff that you can just find and buy inexpensively. And Old Forester 1920. It's funny, so I actually have to give kudos to Casey down at Spirits, because for a while I was going in there and he would say, oh yeah, Old Forester this, Old Forester that. It's like, it tastes like a Trapper Keeper. I don't want that, because that's what the rye.
You don't like the rye.
The rye, it's not my thing. And he says, you got to try the other stuff. And they had a tasting down there, and I tried the bottled and bond, and I tried this 1920. This is one of my favorite bottles ever. Yeah. I will buy this over and over again without hesitation, especially at $60.
And the thing is, they did the first run of that, and then it got super hard to find. They did a second batch, and they've kept the production up. Yeah, but the second sip does, it cools off.
It goes off. It goes quick.
I think the other thing is that when I talk about best bottles, I'm kind of with you. I mean, I did put that Russell's 13 there as my favorite, but the reason I put the Dickel single barrels in there is because they're everywhere. Yeah. And frankly, it shouldn't cost $60 for one of those, but today's market, 15 years old, from a distillery like Dickel, single barrels for $60, it's the deal. I always tell people, friends that are asking me, I want to impress somebody. Well, two ways you impress somebody. One is you get them good whiskey, but the other is you don't spend a ton of money on it. You find the value, the practical part of it. Right. Old Forester 1920, the Four Roses small batch Select, the 104 proof non-chill filtered, always on that list, and now it's going to be the Dickel. Those three bottles represent what have to be not only the best value today in enthusiast level whiskey, but the best whiskey. And I'm kind of with you. I really like this Old Forester barrel proof. It blew me away with how drinkable something could be at 134 proof. Because they won't tell you what age they are, but they're not more than 5 or 6 years old. No. They heat cycle those warehouses. I think that's how it gets so dark in the glass. But gosh, it's just so good. But then you think, well, I got to go chase those down. They're so popular, they're hard to get. Right. It's the extra $20. I can walk in almost anywhere now and buy the 1920. Yeah, you can't beat that.
No, and I think this is a bottle of the year, if not the bottle. Yep. fighting for me for first place is this Dickel. And honestly, I mean, any of the Russells. I mean, it's hard to choose because those 3 bottles are just so easy to get. They're so good.
You know, it's interesting. So here we sit in a market where everything's hard to find. We're in the middle allocation season. People are standing in line fighting to pay 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10 times what a bottle should be worth. But we're hung up on an embarrassment of riches and delicious whiskey that isn't terribly, it ain't exactly cheap, but it's not terribly expensive. It's sitting on shelves.
Right.
That's what we're all about.
And to be clear, I mean, I had a bottle of George T. Stagg on the shelf all year. The 2020 George T. Or sorry, 2021 was 2020. 2020. The 2020 George T. Stagg, which was, by the way, fantastic. I mean, it was one of the best bottles I've ever tasted. But I'm not putting it on this list because you just can't get it. These are accessible. I can drink these, and you listening saying, "Oh, it's one of his favorite bottles." Go buy one and tell me. I mean,
tell us.
That to me is now a key component of what makes a good whiskey.
Yeah.
I can actually drink it. You know, Pappy, I'm probably not going to drink any Pappy. I've had sips of Pappy. It's been great. I'm not going to have one on my shelf.
I'm sure it's great. Is it? It's not great enough for what you go through for that nonsense.
No, I'm not standing in line for stuff anymore.
Yeah. So part of that, accessible, delicious, the proliferation of store picks.
Yeah.
Is something I want to talk about now,
that
too.
sip was good.
Isn't it good? That is shockingly good.
It's so good.
I won't pass on those anymore, but I'm not going to go out of my way just because of how good that 19.
I would say this is like a treat because it is kind of expensive.
But it is kind of candy-like, too.
It is. It's got a lot of caramel to it. But, you know, this is good. But I mean, with this on the shelf all the time, I don't know.
So store picks, which that Old Forester is a store pick, a single barrel. But store picks are everywhere. It is kind of the thing we've turned to because so much is allocated. If you want something a little different, a little special, down to store picks. Because the standard Buffalo Trace, I don't know how many barrels they use in a batch of that, but it's high hundreds, if not 1,000. Do you get a chance to ever drink out of those barrels? Why, as a matter of fact, you do. And what you're drinking here is a younger, less favored barrel that might one day grow up to be Stagg Jr. or George T. Stagg. It's the same mash bill at Buffalo Trace.
And it's like, what, 90 proof, right?
Yeah. And I think the last question is it any better than what Buffalo Trace you'd buy off the shelf? Now, the problem is you can almost never find regular old Buffalo Trace anymore. So a good store, a proper store, a store not trying to take advantage of their customers, that store pick barrel will not cost any more. I'm going to be in on that this time.
Oh, yeah, here you go.
Will not cost any more than a typical. So we paid $25 for those, just like you would. Now, arguably, that's a $16 bottle of whiskey we're paying $25 for. In today's market, I'm okay with that. I happen to like this whiskey, but is it any better than a regular? Now, I happen to have a good reference point that you don't have, because when I bought these for us, I also bought a couple of handles of the standard Buffalo Trace, and I've been sipping on that. Is the store pick any better?
Well, you tell me. Man, coming from the Old Forester. that was the wrong progression.
direction, but I can tell you that store pick's a little bit better. It's sweeter on the front of the palate.
Yeah.
It's a little more coaty. It's not dramatically different, but it is different, a little bit different. Now remember, single barrel doesn't mean it's better. Store pick doesn't mean it's better. Private selection doesn't mean it's better. It's all up to who picked it and which barrels they rolled out that day to choose from. Well, it is different.
And here's my perspective on Buffalo Trace in general. You know, I don't go out of my way for Buffalo Trace because it's never wowed me. It's never been like one of my go-tos. It's good. I mean, it's okay, and especially at $20 or whatever it costs, it's perfectly fine. But it's never been one that I will go out of my way for, especially now that it's actually hard to find. This actually has a little something extra, you know, like I don't know exactly what it is, but this is a more pleasant experience to me than the standard stuff.
Yeah, I think, and it's not always the case.
Right.
But, you know, when you see these little stickers, and this one came from Hazels in Boulder, you know, everybody's got their opinion on who picks the best barrels. But this one definitely, and no kidding, I've been drinking on that handle for a month or so now. Yeah. So I've gotten used to the way it feels. This is a little better. Yeah. There's something different about this one.
Sure.
It's a little sweeter on the nose, a little sweeter on the palate. And I like making old fashions with that. Yeah. Now, my particular method of old fashions dictates that whiskey under 100 proof, 'cause about 100 proof is my cocktail proof. If it's under that, what I'll do for the old fashioned is when I muddle my sugar cube, instead of muddling with water, I muddle with a little bit of the whiskey. And that way I'm not dropping that 90 proof any lower. And then I put my 2 ounces of whiskey on top of that, and then I put the ounce of whiskey in the shot glass and drink it. And that's the complete way to make an old fashioned.
Yeah.
It's the pre-whiskey, the actual whiskey for the cocktail, the post-whiskey sip while you're waiting for it to cool off with your ice.
And we've talked about before trusting the place where you get these single barrels.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, we've kind of honed it to a couple of different places. I mean, Hazels has pretty consistently picked good stuff.
I think so. A lot of people around here complain about Hazel.
Really?
I think everything save one. And I still can't bring myself to post a little video, but that the double oak, the Woodford Reserve double oak that we poured out in the yard, it was awful.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's because it was a store pick or because it's just awful. But other than that, I've enjoyed their picks.
Yeah.
But it is very dependent. Let's go back to your friend and let's say the whole name of the store. So
Spirits, Wine, and Provisions
in Arvada.
Yep.
Old
Arvada, if you're from Colorado.
Arvada, whatever. Casey's got a palate. He does a good job. In fact, he was just in on a charity barrel at Copper Sky in Longmont. One of the distillers there, big part of the operation, Isaac, lost his house, everything in the fire. Yeah. They pulled a barrel. Some of the best pickers in this area chose a barrel for Isaac. It's got a great tater sticker on it with Isaac, and it looks cool. And I'm not a tater sticker kind of guy, but the pickers make a difference. They will either lean towards they want a profile that matches the normal offering but something extra, or they'll lean towards picking something completely off profile. Both are fun, but it does make a difference. And Casey, I believe Casey was in on that pick is the reason I brought that up.
Here's how good Casey is about picking. He's been getting a lot of MGP picks. I don't like MGP. But all of his picks have been really good MGP picks. So, you know, again, it just goes back to trusting where you're getting these single barrels. And I mean, this is a Hazels pick. This is a Hazels pick. These have been reliably good. I've had a Hazels Dickel pick, which was quite good. You know, trust, you know, build relationships with where you're getting your bottles. And to me, Hazels and Spirits have been my go-tos.
Yeah, around here it's been good. There's a bunch of stores around here that do them, and stores all over. In fact, even in control states, back where I'm from, in Alabama, the control state ABC stores do barrel picks. Yep. So it's something a little different. Doesn't mean it's any better. It might be worse. Yeah. Depends on who picked it. And some of them go to the distilleries back pre-COVID. You go, they pull barrels, you have the whole experience. Some people argue that puts you under this mist of you don't know what you're tasting. And some of them just send samples to the store. Again, maybe they sent great samples. You don't know till you taste the whiskey. But if you taste a few and you're digging what they're doing, then you know that the palate's picking those barrels you can depend on. If you taste a few and they're kind of meh, well then maybe you don't, because you know this stuff isn't cheap. Yep. Cool. Right on. Dan, thanks for sharing your favorites this year and your whiskeys.
Always happy to share.
Anything else?
Follow us on. We have a YouTube handle change.
We do.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. You can go youtube.com/thepracticalstill. Get straight to it. There's a bunch of I put the watch list up there, so if you want to see the back to the bottles where after we've drank on stuff for a while and we go back, or the open the bottles, what's our first impression of them? There's one for store picks, so if it happens to be an open the bottle, it's a store pick. You can slice and dice it wherever you want, but there's 150 or so of those videos up there now. I think they're fun, but let me know what you think. If you don't like what we're doing, if you wish Dan would have drank one instead of the other, let him know. He's got a pile of whiskey over there. I'm sure he'd be happy to open it. I'm the same way. Yeah. And there's, speaking of Deerhammer, there's a few videos up there on the visit where we went in and got to hang out in the rack house. Lenny turned us loose with those big straws, and there was a camper out back.
And we were very irresponsible.
So we just drank and drank and drank, and then went to sleep in the camper.
It was great.
But it'll be fun, and we hope to do some more of those distillery visits here soon. So, but we'd love to know if you're enjoying these things and those videos, and what we can do to make it more sippable for you.
Come join us next Friday. Yeah. Give us some comments. So
Chad, if you're in the Denver metro area, Boulder area, holler at us. We'll drink some whiskey. Cheers.
Cheers.